I'm afraid I'm going to go very fast, so it'll just help like take up some time in case I need it. Might have an intermission. Cool. So Ember, new indie software. The goal of this talk, if I had to put it in like a more noble way, would be like to equip you with enough knowledge to build the difference between a prototype and your actual app in Ember. But the way I think of what it usually boils down into is turning randos into users and taking their money. And so that's what we're going to go over. So my priority one for this talk, if we talk, like, I like to think of the quadrant of knowns. Unknown would be like fog of war. I have no idea what we're talking about. A known unknown would be like, I kind of know enough to Google about this, but I'm not a master. A known would be like, I am very good at this, and I can tell you, like, I can walk you through this. An unknown known, which is really interesting, is somebody who just intuitively knows it. Like, my grandma always like made me cook with her, so like I can kind of make things taste okay, but I can't tell you why I can cook that way. So anyways, priority one is I have no idea what I'm doing, and then like I want to teach you enough to be dangerous, to make authentication, authorization, and take people's money in your apps. The second priority is if you kind of know this, hopefully we can kind of fill in some gaps by zooming in and out of the problem. And then the third priority, most of you, if you work on software, probably have authentication and authorization in your app, and it's like set it and forget it. And so you do it once and you never think about it again. So hopefully, if you're in that boat, we can at least go through how this actually works again, and you might have like a more holistic sense of how your app's working. So some disclaimers. I just want to teach you enough to be dangerous. I will miss things. There are things that I won't cover, but I want to equip you with enough that you can go learn on your own on this topic, but we won't cover everything. And my second disclaimer is I'm trying to cover this in like a durable way. So the implementation here will change a lot. It does all the time. So I'll try to keep this blog post up to date with a like nitty gritty TDD front end, back end. If you want to like see every last detail, you can go there. But don't go there yet because I haven't published it. But I will publish it. I will publish it after this talk. So why does this matter? So there's something inherently magical about our job. We turn ideas and make them into software. And for me, like there's this indie hacker community, like it's some podcast. It's like a lot of people who are like, we can make small softwares that will make money, and it's great. But it turns out this is important if you actually like do job stuff too outside of making your own apps, because I don't care what they do in the interview process. If you know how authorization and authentication works in the app, this will come up at your actual job. But it's not where it starts for me. It starts at Starbucks. I was ranting to my friend John after having read this book for the first time. It's like every app is basically Twitter. All we do is list things, edit them. There's like some associations, and then we log in users, and that's it. Like we can build any app now. And over like 5 years and lots of changes, we've built a lot of weird apps. And we thought all of them would work at some point, including like Airbnb for hikes, fish for Instagram, or Instagram for fish, I guess. I don't know, lots of dumb stuff. It's just like, but you know, like at some level, one of these ideas from one of us will be the next Snapchat. It's like, that's exactly what somebody thought when they saw Snapchat version 1. So, I mean, that's not the best example right now, but it's still like true. And then why did I switch to Ember on this? It's so fast to prototype things. Like everything is in the box. It's like convention over configuration of Rails with like the ability to do crazy integrate like interactions that just weren't possible. It's like feels like the future. But along the way, along building all these things, we made money into users and money into a hard problem, but it was never our hard problem that we were trying to solve. And so, anyways, this talk is an homage to that. Hopefully this will cover the users and money part of Ember, and the rest of the guides will be what we need to do the rest, and you can get back to solving your hard problem. Cool. So, super desk rentals. This may sound familiar to you. This is a reference to the super rentals in the Ember guides. It's a lot of times, if you're new to Ember, this is your first Ember app that you have experience with. It's like making a very light Airbnb app in our docs, and we're going to turn that into a real app. And there's quotes there because it is a real app, but we're just adding users and taking their money. So this is what it looks like. And to like boil down the change that we're going to make is when looking for a day office, I want to see the offices in my city and book an office for the day. And so instead of just rentals, which is what we get in the guides, we'll like have rentals, which will have many bookings, and they'll belong to a user. And this is all like not very interesting, so it's the like we will do a few things behind the scenes to set these things up and not cover them in the talk because that would be a waste of everybody's time. I really want cookies right now. But yeah, so this is what we're going to build. So when you click login with GitHub, you will see your little profile. If it's the first time, you'll put in your username and password, and it'll authenticate you. And then if we want to work somewhere for the day, we can type in our very real, totally authentic credit card number and click pay, and it will make a new booking after it does some things that we'll go over. Boop. And then it's now there at the bottom. Great. Cool. So if you're new, we're going to log you in with GitHub and create your account. If you're an existing user, then we're going to log you in with an account we've already created. And then after you've logged in, you can book a rental. So core concepts, better than edge cases here. Yes, we should use something like auth.html instead of index.html to redirect for Tori, and we should use HTTP cookies, but like there's lots of things like that. We want to focus on like the big picture of how, like in a reasonably sustainable way, we can build an app that people can actually use. I also don't endorse Stripe or GitHub. People just know about them and use them, so that's what we're using. There's other great or terrible services out there. Use what you want. These concepts should apply equally well. So now, users, in theory. So our goal is to turn randos into users. And so like the first time you look at this problem, you're like, well, obviously we need like a login with X button. But if this is the first time you've done this, for me, it took a long time to even understand like, but what actually happens when you click login with GitHub? And the problem it solves for you is we need to know who that rando is. And so like OAuth 2 is a protocol that lets external apps request authorization to details in a user's GitHub account. And it is an authorization protocol that we're tricking into letting us authenticate a user. So like we take somebody, we're like, you're a person, GitHub can prove who you are, give us some details about who you are, and we can use that to create an account for you. It's like a trick. But the GitHub user is not our super desk rental user. This sounds really basic to point out, but it's not. Like it's really confusing. Like I did not know that. I thought I was like using the GitHub user for the first time I did this. So again, for a first-time user, we're going to log them in with OAuth. We're going to use the /user endpoint to get some information about them, and based on that information, we're going to use that to create a user in our system. So cool. Case closed. New account. We know like conceptually how to do this, and we'll build this later. Don't worry. We have plenty of time. And so if you're an existing user, we can take a unique identifier from GitHub that happens to be ID, but like you'll just have to kind of iron out. Like there will be some unique identifier on your OAuth client that we can use as essentially a foreign key between our system and their system. And so if somebody logs in and we've already created an account, we will remember that key, and then we can look them up by it. So case closed again. Using a unique key between Super Rentals and GitHub, we can prove who they are and show a cool avatar. Here's how it works. This is usually like when I check out of anything related to OAuth. Don't worry. We're gonna instead of like trying to go through this, we're gonna treat it like a conversation between the client, the server, and GitHub. So let's look at them like this instead. So client being your browser, like your session you have on your iPhone or your desktop. Your API being our Super Desk Rentals API that we've pushed to Heroku somewhere and built with Node or Rails. And then GitHub being that place where we check in our code during the day. Or like there's other options, but you know. So the first step is the client is going to ask GitHub like who is this? And so we've all seen this pop up where we'll log in and it's like, hey, this app wants to do see some basic things about you. And then behind the hood, it returns an authorization code, which doesn't do anything on its own. But if we pass that code from the client to the API, then we can take the authorization code that GitHub gave us about the user, and then a secret key that we have on our client, we can bundle them together and create an authorized token from GitHub that we can have like privileges to do things as that user. So like look up the user details. So then once we have that, our API will use that key to be like, cool, do I have an account for this user? If not, I'll create one. Otherwise, I will just log them in. And then afterwards, and this is important, we will generate a token on our API that is different, not related to the GitHub token at all, that will just allow the client to talk securely to our API. So GitHub takes care of authentication for us by proving a user is who they say they are and providing basic information about the user. And then our API is going to manage the users and then facilitate secure communication between an authenticated client and a user. So let's build it. In practice, so first step is we need to create an OAuth application, which will provide us a client ID, which we'll use to configure our front end, and a client secret, which if you publish to GitHub, you will get owned. Instead, you will just keep it secretly on your server and not let anybody access it. So on the front end, we will start by just making a very basic button that does nothing when you click it. And then we will introduce two extremely important add-ons. One of them is called Tori, and this provides us a nice abstraction for interacting with our OAuth providers. And so this is like popping up the window and communicating between either a window or an iframe. So it's like a nice abstraction around that. And then Ember Simple Auth, which is a nice abstraction around managing our session data. And so these two will work together to like do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So Ember install Ember Simple Auth, Ember install Tori. The next step, we will take the GitHub client ID that we generated from our OAuth app and add it as a configuration option for Tori. And this is like a very implementation specific note. In order to get Tori and Ember Simple Auth to work together, we have to generate a Tori authenticator, which just inherits from the default Tori authenticator from Ember Simple Auth, and then injects the Tori service from Tori. This confuses me every time because it seems like you shouldn't have to do this, but you have to kind of like marry the services together from the different add-ons like this for it to work. And it just looks like that. And so then the next step is, instead of just console logging the siren, we're going to do this.get session, which is our simple auth session, run the authenticate method, which comes from our Tori authenticator, and pass in GitHub OAuth 2 as our OAuth provider. So like you can imagine if you had lots of OAuth providers, you could pass in different ones and handle this a different way, but this is just enough to be dangerous, enough to get something working. And this is good. We have the pop-up, we can log in, we can get information about ourselves for ourselves on our Super Rentals API. And so from this, that authorization code and that like diagram earlier, we pass it back to our authenticate method. So again, this is the Tori authenticator that we made earlier. We're overriding the authenticate method. We're doing this.super, so like it's doing a bunch of OAuth stuff for us in Tori, or Ember Simple Auth. And then here's where we need to actually take the authorization code that GitHub gives us and give it to our server. So I put token exchange URI here. In this case, it's /API/token. It can be anything, but this is something you have to implement on your own server. And to kind of zoom out and understand what's happening here, the client is going to post the /API/tokens with our auth code. Then the server is going to say, cool, I'm going to take that auth code and then the other GitHub configuration secrets I have and post it to GitHub. And that is when we'll get our access token where we can act as that user in the scopes that we specified when we set up our OAuth app. And then we can get the information about the user. Then we can use that to find or create our user account. And finally, we will provide whatever type of bootstrap information we want back to the server, usually like email, token, provider. We could do other things if we want to, but we don't have to. And this is like back in our authenticate method. We'll return this to Simple Auth, and Simple Auth will stick it in our session, and we can access it. And so at this point, we have everything in place to make authorized requests from our API as our user. And so, it's like easy to build. If we need to do a profile thing, we can tack our token onto request and get securely communicate for endpoints regarding us. If we're creating a booking, we can tack that token onto request to create the booking, and it knows it's us. So like bonus exercises here is like current user, and also just for people watching and wondering like how do we get all the other things set up, like Google OmniAuth. That's like the backend library and thought you would use to have multiple OAuth providers. But next, we're going to talk about money. I know you would think I'm a designer. I'm not. But so monies in theory. So another disclaimer: people turn out to be extremely sensitive about their money. So whenever you're taking somebody's money, like it is very nice to use a service like Stripe. It saves you a lot of security and compliance headaches. Like there are other options out there. Highly recommend using a service that specializes in this though. Congratulations, another chart that nobody wants to read, but we'll break it down. So it is very similar actually in that we have like a third party we're communicating with between the client and the API. So it should be pretty easy for us to do this. So first thing to note, the credit card information will never touch our server. It will go directly to Stripe, and we will use a JavaScript library from Stripe to do this. So like they will take care of all of the security updates to their JavaScript code, and we will just trust that it's great. It's not always great, but we'll pass all of the information to Stripe. Stripe will generate a token for us. This is like, again, very similar to the OAuth flow in a lot of ways. With this token, we are authorized to run one charge for the user. You can do it differently, but let's just assume one charge for this. And we will pass that token along with our normal booking request. So just like you would create anything else in Ember, we will just know that this is going to charge the user. That's when we will pass, with that token and the details about the booking, we can charge Stripe via their SDK. We'll see the monies go up in our account. We'll be super happy. Stripe will give us a confirmation with details that we can provide back to the user, so like for payment history, and then we'll return and successfully create the booking. So in this case, most of the work is done by Stripe and the server, which is great. As a front-end engineer, this is exactly what I want. So in practice, let's build this. So step one, get the Stripe keys. Step two, there's lots of options to use Stripe. And we're going to use checkout.js. So this is like the little pop-up that everybody sees when they put in their money. You can do like custom form stuff, and like, but you can Google and figure that out. Like we're just going to use this for ease. And also, when I was in the coffee shop writing this talk, I started to write my own add-on to do checkout.js because I was fed up with something else from one of the other ones. This is not the point. Like use add-ons to solve your hard problems. Do not bike shed on things that don't matter. So I just installed this instead, and like you can see, it's pretty easy. Like it takes care of installing one JavaScript library for us, and then all we do is a callback for like our token. So we have the pop-up now, and then there's a component that we can use, and I kind of wrapped it in this component, but essentially after the Stripe add-on gets the token for us, we just pass it to a very standard create request, which we called book rental. So passing the model, and that's when we'll do post to /API/booking with the booking data and the Stripe token. We can use a Stripe SDK to charge. We get the confirmation, and we show the client. Congratulations, we've done it. We've turned randos into users, and we've taken their money. If you have questions or comments, I am myname.com or at my name everywhere, which is Ryan LaBouve. And I want to leave you with one quote that will come in handy when you try to do this for the first time yourself, because it will not all go smoothly. The difference between theory and practice is greater in practice than in theory. So don't get discouraged. Just, you can do this. And then a funny Stack Overflow slide. Credits. Random people who've helped me, random things I found on the internet, articles that are useful. I do a meetup called Oklahoma City Indie Hackers where we make small softwares and talk about it. It's super fun. Thank you, Envoy. They pay my bills, and they sent me here to talk, so they're great too. End.